Frontierland. Disneyland's answer to the old American frontier, full of saloons, steamboats, and runaway mine trains. But underneath the old world charm lies a history of real tragedy at the park. Some were terrible, avoidable accidents, the kind where you think, oh, it'll never happen to you, until it does. Others were the result of reckless decisions made after dark that ended up with fatal consequences. Disneyland acknowledged its part in all of this. In some cases, they accepted responsibility and paid out to the families of those who lost their lives. But even with those settlements, money doesn't bring people back, and it doesn't always help people move on. Least of all, it seems, the dead. Ask any cast member who works in Frontierland and they'll probably have a story or two to share, of seeing strange shadows on Tom Sawyer Island, or hearing phantom footsteps around the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, or even being trapped in the Golden Horseshoe by something that they can't see, but they definitely felt. Because for the ghosts of Frontierland, death is only the beginning. So Frontierland was one of the 5 original themed lands within the park that opened on the 17th of July 1955, and it was the largest land out of all of them, taking up almost a third of the original property. But despite the size of it, it wasn't exactly packed with attractions. Walt Disney had envisioned Frontierland to reflect, obviously, the American frontier, modelling the area on the mining boom towns that popped up all over the place in the 19th century. But as part of that, back in the day, it was the Wild West. There were large expanses of wilderness with nothing for miles and miles around. And so in Frontierland, guests would sort of be able to get a feel for that, as they had stagecoaches, pack mules, and Conestoga wagons all taking guests on a ride around the themed land. And back when it opened too, Disneyland didn't shy away from the conflict that made the American frontier what it was. There was a scene that could be found on the north end of Tom Sawyer Island that was added the year after opening in 1956, which showed a settler's cabin on fire and the settler lying dead on the floor with an arrow in his back, the story obviously being that he had been attacked by the Native Americans. Eventually though, the story changed and the arrow was removed, and so he became a moonshiner whose still had blown up and he had destroyed his cabin. He also wasn't dead anymore though, he'd just been sampling too much of the good stuff and got a bit carried away and passed out. But as with all Disneyland lands, Frontierland would also be updated and changed as the years went on, more rides and attractions and things being added in. Big Thunder Ranch was one such attraction, being both a product and then a victim of the inevitable evolution of the park. It was opened in 1986 and featured a log cabin that turned into a gift shop and then into like a crafting centre. But it was a ranch, and so there were animals in a petting zoo there for a time, as well as a barbecue place. Circle of Life and all that. That was just a bad joke. They didn't actually cook the petting zoo animals. That would have been problematic. Eventually, Big Thunder Ranch would close permanently in 2016 though, to make way for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, as that took over that area. But before the ranch closed, cast members did report some weird goings on in that area. They would claim that they could hear the sounds of horses' hooves hitting the pavement near to them, which in the day wouldn't be an unusual sound, maybe an echo somewhere or something. There was a little cut through that the Disneyland horses could use to get from the backstage stables to wherever it is they would be performing. But the thing was, these cast members heard the horses' hooves when there categorically couldn't be any horses about. They were all tucked up in bed in the backstage stables for the night by that point. But also, the lighting in the Big Thunder Ranch log cabin used to flicker, and then somehow, if the cast members had a radio on or something, it would sometimes change volume or even change stations without any explanation. I know flickering lights is pretty easy to explain away, it's just dodgy wiring or some such, but radios? Changing volume and stations? Maybe interference from other stations or something? It's still a little bit strange. According to the cast members, there wasn't any sort of interference or anything. This was the doing of Frontierland's resident ghost, Harold the Horseman. Although I couldn't find any more information on him, who he was, whether he was an actual 19th century farm labourer from before the park's time, and maybe he used to work on the orange groves that used to grow on the land before, maybe. And so seeing Big Thunder Ranch seemed most familiar to him, maybe. Or maybe he's just a deceased cast member or a guest who just doesn't want to leave, which could be similar to what has apparently happened at another attraction in Frontierland. Possibly one of the most infamous in this area, because the namesake for the ranch was obviously Big Thunder Mountain, and more crucially, the railroad, the mine train roller coaster, which opened on the 2nd of September 1979. And so the story behind this ride, kind of like the lore that goes along with it, was that they'd found gold in Big Thunder Mountain, and so a big old mining boomtown had blew up in the area. However, the mountain was sacred to the Native Americans, and all this mining displeased the spirits of the mountain. So kind of almost getting into ghost train territory here again. And so there was an earthquake which made mining too dangerous, and the operation was abandoned. And so then after that, with no miners around, the mine trains started to run along the tracks on their own, powered by the spirits as they were pushing them along. And pretty much as soon as this ride opened, it was a huge success. It's fast, it's super themed, and it's also one of those rides where you only have the bar across your lap. I don't know, for some reason, I don't really like roller coasters, and I absolutely draw the line at the big roller coasters where you're fully like plugged into those huge old life jacket hugger things. But roller coasters like this, I don't mind. I can just about do them. I don't know whether it's because it's just a lap bar, it somehow feels safer to me, or gives me an indication of how intense the ride is going to be. Either way, I would have felt okay about riding this one. But now that I've heard the story I'm about to tell you, I may never set foot on another roller coaster again, because on the 5th of September 2003, a horrific incident would take place here. Unbeknownst to anyone there was a full-on Final Destination 3 scene playing out. You know, the one with the roller coaster? Not the camera strap bit that gets wrapped around the tracks or anything like that though. It wasn't caused by park guests at all. The problem was with one of the upstop wheels on the train itself. And so that's basically how the ride is attached to the track to stop it from derailing. Throughout that morning, this particular train had started to make this weird clanking sound, which the cast members aren't the mechanics, they don't know what on earth it could be. But on the 12th go round, they decided, you know what? This just isn't right. After the next go round, the next cycle, we'll pull this train for inspection just to see what's going on. At that point, 22-year-old Marcelo Torres, an aspiring animator who was visiting Disneyland with a few of his mates, including his best friend Vicente Gutierrez, they were having a cracking old time, all fun and smiles, and they were at the front of the queue for the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. When it came up to be their turn, Marcelo and Vicente took the 2 front passenger seats, right behind the locomotive where no one sits, it's kind of just for show, with Marcelo sitting in the right-hand seat. Their 2 other friends were sat in the passenger car directly behind them, so they were kind of all together but right at the front of the train. The lap bars were fastened down and that was it. At 17 minutes past 11 in the morning, the ride started. Cycle number 13, the last one before this particular train was going to be pulled for inspection into that weird clanking noise that was going on. The ride was going fine until just about where the train entered the tunnel. In an instant, the locomotive that was right in front of where Marcelo and Vicente were sitting derailed, and the axle caught against the track and the brake system. And so what happened was, this pushed the nose of the train down into a nosedive, lifting the back of the train off the track and snapping the tow bar connecting the train to the passenger cars. And so at that point, the train has got its nose down, bum kind of up in the air, and with nothing to stop it, Marcelo and Vicente's cart kept moving forward until it became wedged underneath the back of the train that was up in the air. And I've tried to explain that as clearly as I can just to give you an idea of how it actually happened. But you've got to remember that this unfolded in seconds. It would have been just as quick as that horrendous roller coaster scene from Final Destination 3, which, unless you cannot tell, lives rent-free in my head at all times. That and the sunbed bit. Anytime I hear Love Roller Coaster come on, flashbacks. The 24 passengers on that particular cycle would have been completely and utterly helpless to stop it. It would have happened in the blink of an eye. One minute you're laughing, screaming from enjoying the ride, and then the next you are screaming but for a completely different reason. You're living in a waking nightmare. The rest of the passengers were able to get out, either by themselves or with a little help, but Marcelo and Vicente were pinned into their seats. Vicente was able to be extracted and he was taken to the hospital along with a few other riders. He suffered from facial lacerations, concussion, and a fractured rib. Marcelo wasn't so lucky. He was completely stuck and he died before rescuers could get him out. He had suffered from blunt force trauma to the chest, fractured ribs which had led to lacerations on his lungs, and I just can only hope that he wasn't conscious. I cannot, nor would I ever want to, even begin to imagine what that must have been like for him. The report afterwards found that that particular train had been having issues long before this though. 3 days before the incident, the train had been in the workshop where they had replaced that wheel, but they hadn't tightened up the bolts properly, which had led to the wheel coming loose, causing that clanking sound. What's even worse is that this should have been caught by the manager who would have signed off on the work before it ever even made it out into service. but it didn't get picked up. And so the clanking sound that was heard on those first 12 cycles were the bolts working loose, until eventually the wheel fell off on the 13th cycle and caused the fatal disaster. Marcello's family sued Disney, and when they settled, they donated $500,000 to Brooks College, where Marcello had been studying, to fund a scholarship for student animators, just like Marcello. Disneyland did overhaul safety protocols though, and the ride was shut down for months afterwards to make sure it was up to standard, reopening in March 2004. But some cast members are still haunted by what happened that September morning, with some blaming the incident for the weird things that have been reported around Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Multiple employees have claimed to see shadowy figures walking on the tracks, and so obviously safety guidelines are that if you think you see someone on the tracks, you need to go and check. And so they'll be there walking the track, but they don't find a single living soul. One time after closing, a cast member was just doing the nightly routine of walking the track, just checking it all over, making sure none of the guests had dropped anything through the day or anything like that, when she noticed a human shadow on the rock wall next to her. But it wasn't her own shadow. Totally understandable thing to think initially. I mean, I have on occasion been known to get frightened by my own shadow. It's rare, but it has happened once or twice. Anyway, she said that this shadow was wearing something like a baseball cap, which was super odd, as she was not. The shadow just didn't match her at all. The other weird thing was, it was following her around a bend and near to the first lift hill before it just vanished. All credit to her though, she said that she didn't feel scared or threatened or anything, and from then on afterwards, she'd chat away to her shadowy friend whenever she was doing the post-closing walkthrough. Guests riding the train have also complained of strange sensations, outside the ones that you'd expect on a roller coaster. Some claim to have felt like someone was pulling on their hair when there was no explanation, and there was one time where a woman said it felt like a properly deliberate pull, as if someone behind you is trying to get your attention, only there couldn't have been anyone there, as she was sitting in the back of the train. There were no passenger carts behind her. Men have also had their shirt pulled while they were on the ride. Again, no explanation, no terrified offspring sitting next to them regretting pulling their dad onto this ride or anything like that. Some people believe that these incidents could have been Marcello Torres, as it's not just shadow figures and feeling sensations. Some cast members have spotted the apparition of a man sitting on a bench alongside the pathway that you walk on as you exit the ride, and they say that he emits this just really uneasy kind of vibe before he just disappears in front of you. I think if I was a cast member working past closing and I saw someone who clearly wasn't an employee sitting somewhere where there shouldn't be anyone, I'd feel pretty uneasy too. There have been other people say that the employee bathroom by Thunder Mountain could be haunted by the same guy as well. Apparently he appears in the women's bathroom, just as if he has as much right to be there as anyone else, and is said to ask one of two things. Either, where can he get tickets for the attractions, or what time does the park close? Before again, just disappearing, not even hanging around to hear the answer. But my guy, like, you're good. Closing times and tickets don't apply to you anymore. Feel free to haunt somewhere else in the park rather than the women's bathroom though too. But there are also other stories of a ghost of a young Victorian girl seen around Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Apparently there was a photo taken from just outside the entrance to the ride, and in this photo there was what looked to be a little girl dressed in Victorian clothes, with blonde hair, and she was holding onto a teddy bear. I have not seen this photo, nor can I find a copy of this photo anywhere, so we've just got the story to go off of, that's it. Anyways, in 2012, a cast member who had the photo gave it to a psychic medium friend of hers, who took a good look at it and then visited the park. She claimed that she made contact with this entity from the photo, and the little girl had told her that a long time ago she'd fallen down a well, one that was on the property of one of the orange groves, so way before the age of Disneyland. But she also went on to say that she was fine now, she was totally okay, perfectly happy. I mean, she's a little girl spending eternity in the happiest place on earth. No wonder she was happy and didn't want any help with moving on or anything like that. So that's her story from a psychic medium, so, you know, take from that what you will. I thought it was a fun story to include anyway. But Big Thunder Trail, the walkway behind the mountain that connects Frontierland to now Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, that also has a story or two connected to it. Similarly to the mountain, shadowy figures have been seen on this trail way past closing, when there shouldn't be any people just wandering about. Some cast members have felt distinct taps on their shoulders when they're walking the trail late at night, alone. But there is one phenomenon that cast members report, and I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest. There was a guy who was one of the outdoor vendors during the day, and I'm not super familiar with how the different shifts work at Disneyland, but he did that bit of guest-facing work. And then after closing, he would also be one of the people who would move these vendor carts into the main warehouse for storage overnight. And he was still there at 2 a.m. one time, finishing up. So you can just imagine the scene, can't you? Super dark, kind of a little bit eerie, no one about. But as he was walking along the Big Thunder Trail with just his torch for light so he could see where he was going, he heard a whisper. Faint, barely there, but enough that he could make out what this whisper said. Someone had whispered this guy's name, Andrew. He stopped, looked around, but didn't see anyone. He soon shrugged it off though. It's 2 a.m, he's tired, maybe hearing things in the wind. This is a bit of a creepy area, just stop letting your mind wander and just get back to walking straight ahead. But he heard it again. Andrew. This time with a little more enthusiasm. Someone was clearly trying to get his attention. He stopped again and shone his torch around, trying to see if there was any other cast member trying to have a laugh with him. But again, he didn't see anything. Okay, getting very weird now. But still, he's got a job to do, and the sooner he gets out of this very creepy trail, the better. So that's it. He picked up his pace and started walking again, when he heard, right in his ear, someone shout his name. Andrew. I can only imagine the colour of the air in the happiest place on earth at that moment. I can fully imagine the language was far from family friendly. Later on, when he was telling one of his mates, another cast member, about this encounter, all his buddy did was look at him and go, "You too?" Not as in Bono, but as in his mate had had the same thing happen to him on that stretch of the Big Thunder Trail. As far as I can tell, we don't know who it is whispering cast members' names, but there is one theory that it's the ghosts of two little girls. I don't know if they're connected to the little blonde girl holding the teddy outside of the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, but the story here is that they died in a flood in the early 1900s, so not down a well this time. There was a particularly bad flood in the area in 1938, which killed over 100 people and left Anaheim in up to 6 foot of water for weeks afterwards, so I don't know, perhaps? I don't know how we know that information about the little girls though. I'm guessing the story might have started similarly to the Victorian girl, from a psychic medium claiming to make contact, so again, make of that what you will. But we are far from done with Frontierland. We're not carrying on the Big Thunder Trail and heading into Star Wars just yet. I still have plenty to tell you about from inside this area of the park. I wonder if there are any ghosts in the Star Wars bit yet though. Based on what I've found so far about Disneyland, I'm gonna guess that it is inevitable that there will be a story or two. But anyway, that is a chat for another day. Because the rivers of America in Frontierland and the boat rides on said river, yep, haunted. And when you know the history, it does kind of make sense. The Rivers of America was an original feature at Disneyland, as guests could take a ride on the Mark Twain riverboat around the island. You couldn't actually go onto the island itself when the park first opened though. And if you want to hear about the hauntings on the Mark Twain riverboat, go check out part 1 after this, as Mr. Disney himself is said to have made an appearance on there every now and then. But the river then went through a bit of rerouting in 2016 to, again, make room for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. But it's all open and everything now, and you can take the Mark Twain riverboat still, or the sailing ship Columbia, or David Crockett's exploring canoes around there, or of course, take a raft over to Tom Sawyer Island. But while the Rivers of America is the location of a bunch of fun attractions in Frontierland, at the end of the day, it is still a body of water, and it is deceivingly dangerous, even in a place as magical as Disneyland, as 2 teenagers have found out over the years. The first incident happened on the 22nd of June 1973. 2 boys, 18-year-old Bogdan Delarue and his 10-year-old brother Dorian, were visiting Disneyland for the day when they did something a bit naughty. They were on Tom Sawyer Island towards the end of the day, and in case you don't know, it is properly an island. The only way on or off is via the rafts that cross the river throughout the day. So when the cast members came to the island as it was closing to clear out all the guests and make sure that everyone made it off the island safely, Bogdan and Dorian hopped the fence into a restricted area, and they'd got into the bit where the burning cabin was, so away from anywhere cast members would expect guests to be milling about. They weren't found, and once the last cast members had left the island on the last rafts, that was it. The 2 brothers had gotten away with it. They were alone, unattended, on Tom Sawyer Island. And for a good few hours, they were having a great time, exploring, walking around, all fun and games, until it got a little bit later in the evening and they ran out of things to do. At about 9:30ish, the brothers decided they'd had had enough. The novelty had worn off, they'd done everything that they wanted to do, but of course, they were stuck on an island. They weren't about to go and shout for help or anything like that, as they didn't want to get in trouble for sneaking off and being somewhere that they shouldn't be after hours. So Bogdan came up with a plan. They were going to have to swim across. Only problem with that, though, was that his little brother Dorian couldn't swim. No worries, we can work with this. Dorian, you get on my back and I'll swim us both across. I just want to interject right here and say that please, for the love of all things good and decent in this world, do not do this. If you are not a ridiculously strong swimmer with training on exactly what to do not jump in after a drowning person to try and save them, and do not try and carry someone who cannot swim on your back. It will not go as well as you think it will in your head. Especially for people who cannot swim, like little Dorian. It's not intentional, but they will panic and cling to you and push you down to try and save themselves. It is also a lot harder than it seems, so you're going to get super tired really quickly. So please, just call for help. Getting in a little bit of trouble is so much better than what I am about to tell you. Because as the brothers got partway across the river, Dorian noticed that Bogdan had started to sink. And he carried on sinking until he disappeared completely under the water, leaving Dorian furiously doggy paddling, trying to stay afloat. The poor little boy was obviously terrified, seeing his big brother slip away from him like that, and so he started screaming for help. At about 20 to 10 in the evening, a cast member noticed Dorian in the water and went to rescue him. He told them about his brother, Bogdan, and that he was still out there somewhere. The police were called, as well as the fire and rescue, but they didn't find Bogdan's drowned body until the morning after. That story, man, that was really rough to read about. I know the boys shouldn't have been out there and whatever, but what a horrendous way to go. And what a horrific thing for Dorian too. But almost 10 years later, on the 3rd of June 1983, the Rivers of America would claim another victim. It was grad night at Disneyland, an event where the park was open after hours for high school graduates. And one of these graduates was another 18-year-old called Philip Strahan. Not only was he at Disneyland celebrating graduation, but it was also his birthday. He was turning 18 that day. Apparently, he had been celebrating a little too hard though, and had gotten drunk with one of his mates, when they decided it would be a fantastic idea to steal one of the inflatable maintenance boats and take it out on the Rivers of America. While they were out on the river though, apparently the boat hit a rock and threw Philip overboard. The friend was okay, but he couldn't see Philip anywhere in the water, and so he just went back to shore to get cast members and the authorities to come and help find him. After an hour-long search though, they found Philip's body, and he had drowned. A lot of sources say that this incident actually happened on the 4th of June, and I think that might be because his body was pulled from the water at about 15 minutes past midnight, and it was then obviously reported in the newspapers on the 4th of June. But his headstone says that he died on the 3rd of June. Born on the 3rd of June, died on the 3rd of June. After Philip's death, his mom tried to sue Disneyland, and then the travel agency that had arranged the trip, saying that he should have been denied entry to the park if he was so intoxicated, but neither lawsuit went anywhere. But even now, over 40 years after Philip's death, and even longer for Bogdan, cast members and guests report strange things around the water. Some say that it looks like the water starts moving in weird ways, as if someone unseen is in there, paddling, swimming, or drowning in the water. But I mean, that could be a lot of things, right? There are fish in the river, could just be one of those under the surface, anything like that. What is a little harder to explain away though, is the disembodied cries that are sometimes heard. A young boy will apparently be heard crying out for his brother late at night when there are no guests around, certainly no children. When cast members go and investigate though, they never find anyone. There is no one living crying out from the river. That just gives me goosebumps to think about though. Imagine cleaning down after closing and you hear a young boy crying for his brother from the river. You'd obviously go and check, as your first rational thought would be that it is a guest locked inside the closed park. But when you don't find anyone living and you know the story of the Delarue brothers, hearing those cries, I can imagine that would be such a gut punch. They're also thought to be responsible for the ghostly goings-on over on Tom Sawyer Island itself too. Initially, when the island was first opened to the public in June 1956, it was inspired by The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, obviously, by Mark Twain. And so the island was designed to be as close to the story as possible. And on opening day, they had cat catfish shipped in from Missouri. They also had 2 kids from Mark Twain's hometown of Hannibal, Missouri, to play Tom Sawyer and Becky Thatcher from the book. They even read out this fake declaration that had come from the governor of Missouri to say that the island had been annexed to the state of Missouri. You get that raft across the river, you're in a different state entirely, my friend. May as well hitch up your dungarees and get your paintbrush now. Bit of a tangent, but that is actually something they used to do on the island. Up until recently, I think. They might not do it there anymore. I could be wrong there. But cast members would go around and hide a bunch of paintbrushes on the island. And then if you found one, you could swap it for a fast pass to Splash Mountain or Thunder Mountain. I tell you, I've been having a blast putting this one together yet again. I always love the little Easter eggs and things that they do at the park. I just love covering Haunted Disneyland. When the park first opened, you could also go fishing for actual live catfish. That was a thing you could do. But apparently people were leaving fish all over the park, so that was not the most ideal. In 2007, the island received a complete overhaul to coincide with the release of the 3rd Pirates of the Caribbean film at World's End, and so a lot of the elements were changed to fit in with that theme. But it is still the site of the show Fantasmic, which started in 1992 and is this nighttime show that takes place on the actual river and the island itself. And it's during these shows where cast members have claimed to feel something otherworldly outside the magic of Disney. They'll be on the island, no one else around them, and they'll just feel like an invisible small child has just tugged on their clothes trying to get their attention. Other times, when the show is finished and the island is in darkness after closing, cast members could have sworn that they can see the shadowy figures of kids, maybe teenagers, wandering about on the island. Obviously not wanting a repeat of what happened last time, they'll go over to the island and check it all over, but not come across a single soul. Okay, must have just been seeing shadows moving about, whatever, cool. Only when they go back to the mainland, they'll look over and see those figures moving about again. I don't know, maybe trees causing shadows that can only be seen at a particular angle? I don't know. But children's laughter has also been heard coming from the island. Again, after dark, once the park is completely closed, there shouldn't be any kids about. Other times, footsteps have been heard by cast members approaching the dock area where you board the raft to get over to the island. But as the footsteps get louder and closer, no one materialises. And so while yes, it could just be the 2 teenagers who drowned in the river, it could also, allegedly, be the girl known as Mary. The story with Mary goes that she was a young child in the 70s and, like many kids, loved Disneyland, especially the Haunted Mansion and Tom Sawyer Island. Unfortunately, she had leukemia and tragically passed away from it. Her parents knew that she would have wanted to spend eternity in the happiest place on earth, and so they decided to scatter her ashes there. I've said this in an earlier part of this series, but I'm saying it here again. Do not take your loved one's ashes to scatter at Disneyland. It's all cute and sentimental for you, less cute for the cast member who's got to go and hoover up Granny. Even less cute if you get caught and kicked out the park. But anyway, Mary's parents did, and knowing that the ashes would most likely get swept up in the Haunted Mansion, which is a fair assumption, they chose Tom Sawyer Island to do it. Ever since that point, some cast members have apparently seen the figure of a little girl in a white dress on the island. The only reason we supposedly know her name is because many years later, the parents came back to Disneyland and got chatting to a cast member at the Haunted Mansion, and they told them what they'd done. So the story goes. But on the island, there may even be paranormal activity of the non-human variety, namely felines, because the park does actually have a colony of feral cats on the property to help with controlling the population of rats and such. Sod the roller coasters, I'm off to go and find and most likely fail miserably at making friends with all the cats. I can imagine that rodents would really quickly become a problem in a place like a theme park though, with all that food around. Naturally, most of the feral cats are wary of humans, so at night is usually when you're going to see them about, if you're going to see them. But cast members have said that if they're over there on the island after closing, they may feel something brush up against their legs, much like Bean does when she starts getting hungry. They'll reach down to pet the cat that they just most definitely felt at their legs, only to find nothing there. And this has been reported in other areas of the park too, but it's interesting that it happened on Tom Sawyer Island, as there used to be a little display area here that resembled a burial ground. And the legend goes that somehow cast members would bring their deceased pets in and bury them in this little cemetery bit. I don't even know how they would have managed that, with how hot they are with guests on bringing ashes in, but a full-on pet would slip under the radar. Anyway, some people believe that this phantom feline is actually one of the pets that was supposedly buried here. So while Tom Sawyer Island may be the home to ghost cats or just over-friendly pest controllers, they're not the only ones lingering by the riverside. Because we can't talk about ghosts of Frontierland without mentioning the sailing ship Columbia. And we chatted about the sailing ship Columbia a little bit in part 1 of this series a few months ago, as similarly to the Mark Twain riverboat, it is said to be haunted by the big man himself. A cast member cleaning below deck late one night apparently came face to face with the apparition of a young Walt Disney. But that is not all I need to tell you about with this ship. So the sailing ship Columbia is a full-scale replica of an 18th century tall ship, the Columbia Rediviva, the first American ship to sail around the world. And this replica has been carrying Disneyland guests around the rivers of America since 1958. That's her job during the day. But by night, she has a part to play in Phantasmic as Captain Hook's pirate ship. But unfortunately, the sailing ship Columbia would be the backdrop of another horrific tragedy on Christmas Eve 1998. Luann Fee Dawson, a senior programmer and test engineer with Microsoft, his wife, Liu Tui-Vung, their 6-year-old son, and her 8-year-old grandson, as Liu was older than Luann and she'd had 2 adult sons from a previous marriage. They were all there at Disneyland that day, as the boys had never been. This was their first ever visit to the park, so they were just having a little bit of family fun just before Christmas. They were queuing up to ride the sailing ship Columbia next when just the absolute unthinkable happened. Working the attraction was a manager, 30-year-old Christine Carpenter, who hadn't had proper training, but she kind of knew the very basic process and was covering for another cast member. As the ship started approaching the dock, ready for the next load of passengers, Christine could see that they were coming in hot. The ship was going too fast and they were probably going to overshoot the dock. The proper protocol in that situation is that the helmsman who's controlling the ship will just overshoot the dock. It's fine, it's no big deal, and then he'll reverse back, no problems. Christine, who hadn't done the training, didn't know this. As the ship went past her, she threw the mooring line onto a cast iron cleat on the bow of the ship, rather than wait and let the ship reverse back first. Again, because she hadn't received the training, she didn't know that the mooring line was only supposed to keep the stationary ship in place, not contribute in any meaningful way to slowing it down if, like in this instance, the ship had overshot the dock. The force of the sailing ship Columbia carrying on past the dock with the mooring line attached, combined with the fact that the mooring line had been switched out. It should have been a hemp rope, one that was designed to break under too much tension, but was instead a cheaper nylon rope that had too much elasticity and, crucially, didn't break, meant that the metal cleat was ripped from the ship and sent catapulting into the waiting crowd. This cleat, which was about 8 or 9 pounds, first hit Christine, shattering her foot, before smacking Luann and Liu both in the face. Liu ended up with extensive, severe injuries to her face, which required a year of reconstructive surgeries to try and regain feeling, because she'd lost all feeling in her face. Luann, however, suffered catastrophic injuries. He had multiple skull fractures and brain hemorrhaging, and died 4 days later on the 28th of December after he was declared brain dead and he was taken off life support. He'd been 34 years old. As soon as the incident had happened, obviously, the police were called. This had happened in front of a bunch of guests, including the 2 young children who were with the couple. But instead of being directed straight to the dock of the sailing ship Columbia, the police attending the scene were directed to a conference room and were asked to wait there for quite a while. And the reason for that was so that Disneyland employees had time to move the victims, wash the blood off the dock, and remove, there's no nice way of saying this, parts of Luann away from public view. And so by the time the police were shown to the scene, there wasn't really anything significant to see. It had all been cleaned up. The authorities assumed that this wasn't necessarily done for completely nefarious reasons. Disneyland wasn't actively trying to cover it all up, but that they hadn't wanted to upset any guests who saw the grisly aftermath of what had happened. But Disneyland did face severe backlash for not letting authorities onto the scene immediately. And so in the aftermath, they made a bunch of changes, working closer with authorities and improving their safety training. As something that came to light in the investigation was, they found that the bolts that attached the cleat to the ship's bow had already been bent, indicating that someone had put the mooring line on prematurely before this anyway. But while Disneyland did make changes to ensure that this never happened again, some believe that there is some energy still lingering on board the sailing ship Columbia. Lights apparently flicker in the captain's cabin, and multiple people claim to feel a cold spot on the bow of the ship, right where the cleat was ripped off. And then, then, like we chatted about before in part 1, the cast member who saw Walt wasn't the only person to experience things. Multiple cast members have claimed that below deck they've been tapped on the shoulder or grabbed at by something they can't see. But disembarking from the sailing ship Columbia and coming back to solid ground, I've probably saved the best? That doesn't feel like the right word, considering all the dark things I've told you about so far. I've saved what a lot of people consider to be the most haunted until last. Yeah, that's probably a better way of putting it. We need to talk about the Golden Horseshoe Saloon. And this place, it was another one of the original fixtures of Frontierland, because no recreation of the American frontier would be complete without its own Wild West saloon, right? It actually opened slightly earlier than the park itself, as on the 13th of July 1955, so a few days before the grand park opening. The Golden Horseshoe Saloon was the venue for Walt and Lillian Disney's 30th wedding anniversary party. And so from then on, the Golden Horseshoe was one of Walt's favourite places in the park. He would try to catch the show as often as he could, the Golden Horseshoe Review, from his favourite box next to the stage. But we've already chatted all about Walt's ghost at the Golden Horseshoe. Today is for the other entities said to be haunting the building. And the YouTuber Alex the Historian worked at the Golden Horseshoe, and so he had a bunch of stories to share. Some of these are from his videos, so go and check them out, and I will put his channel in the description. But he says that basically the Golden Horseshoe is one of those places in the park. Ask any cast member working in there and they will most likely have had an experience. After the park has closed, when cast members are cleaning down for the night, they'll usually be working alone or with colleagues in a different room or whatnot, and they'll be in the main dining area of the restaurant, when they just get the overwhelming sense that they're not alone. You know, that instinctual gut reaction that there's someone watching you? Couple that with the fact that on the ground floor, the restaurant has a bunch of mirrors in it, and some cast members say that when they have this feeling, like someone's watching them, they'll look up and see a person in the mirror. Okay, gut instinct confirmed, there's the person, but when they turn around to look at them properly, not just their reflection, there's not a soul about. Oof, that is just horror movie gold right there. And sometimes Alex the Historian experienced this himself, and he said that sometimes it happened in the middle of the day, when guests were sitting down, eating, vibing, just having a good time. And again, as a cast member, you'd sense someone watching you. Look in the mirror, yep, someone is staring at you, and you turn around thinking like, oh, it must just be a guest wanting your attention or something, but the person staring at you is gone. It's just all the other guests that are minding their own business. I don't know if it was the same person every time, that would be very interesting to know, but the stage itself seems to be quite a hotspot for activity. A lot of the time, people will see the curtains rustling. And as of right now, there aren't any live shows on at the Golden Horseshoe. The stage just sits empty, but before that, it would be easy to just pass it off as performers behind the curtain or whatever. But then when anyone went to check, there wouldn't be anyone back there. Some cast members, on inspecting the backstage area, have apparently seen the apparition of a can-can dancer back from the Golden Horseshoe Review days, but as soon as she's seen, she disappears into thin air. Other times, little footsteps and a young girl's laugh can be heard back there, because one of the resident ghosts of the Golden Horseshoe appears to be a little blonde girl. And she's been seen in this backstage area by cast members, but other times she has been seen messing about with the curtains and playing on the stage by the guests. They'll obviously point it out to a cast member, a bit like, oh, you might want to go and have a chat and see if you can find that girl's parents. I don't think she is supposed to be up there. But when cast members go and investigate, they don't find anyone. Sometimes this little blonde girl actually appears to families, and she'll go up to their tables while they're eating and try to have conversations with them. But they'll feel like something is just a little off. She isn't quite engaging with them properly, acting a little bit strange, like zoning out and all of that. But there is another entity also said to be haunting the Golden Horseshoe, who some cast members have taken to calling Freddy. The story goes that he was an older gentleman who worked the third shift, so he was there in the middle of the night getting the park ready for guests the next day. And as if the quieter shift wasn't enough, he apparently took his breaks in a little room upstairs in the restaurant that was used as a storage room. And it was behind another storage room, so you'd go through one to get to Freddy's room, if that makes sense. Just really didn't want anyone to stumble across him. You gotta make sure you've got your own private sanctuary to get away from the hustle and bustle of the night shift. And this room that he made his own, it is a tiny little space, right in the A-frame roof, so quite closed in, but that just made the perfect nook for Freddy. The problem was, the story goes on to say that during one of his breaks, Freddy had a heart attack in this room and passed away. And that story, it is just the legend. There's no evidence that a cast member did die in that room, but that hasn't stopped people from believing that it is haunted. Cast members will physically feel feel a difference in the atmosphere at night. It's all fine during the day, Freddy chilling out in his room, but then once employees are closing down, guests have gone home and it's getting late, they will just feel this heaviness descend on the restaurant, almost as if Freddy has emerged from his hideout. He's clocking on for third shift now. Sometimes cast members will hear banging on the door to Freddy's room as if someone is trying to be let out. And I would say that as creepy as that sounds, just go and check the door anyway, because sometimes, regardless of how desperate the door banging is, there is nothing in the room. But other times, you'll see a terrified cast member who got locked in by something unseen. For the record, the door apparently cannot lock, but on multiple occasions, cast members will have gone into Freddy's room to pick something up from storage, and the door will swing shut behind them, just refusing to budge. It will not open until it just does, as if someone's just let go of the door. That's just terrifying, Freddy. I'm just out here trying to do my job. I'd rather not be locked into this very claustrophobic little windowless room, thank you. But even if cast members working in the Golden Horseshoe don't see the little girl or figures in the mirror or experience the wrath of Freddy, a lot of them are convinced that there definitely is something going on there, something they can't explain. And so while, as far as we know, there haven't been any tragedies at the Golden Horseshoe, it seems that perhaps Frontierland has seen more than enough misfortune to seep into every inch of the themed land, to make it one of the most haunted areas in Disneyland. It does just make you wonder though, doesn't it? All of these ghost stories, they don't just appear out of nowhere, do they? Surely, with the volume of them all across Frontierland, there's got to be something to it. Or is it all just the power of suggestion, with people knowing about the deaths that have happened here? They know the stories, and so anything slightly strange is paranormal? I don't know. For me, I do think that some could be that. Like the sailing ship Columbia, other than Walt's apparition, there aren't really proper witness accounts of unexplained, allegedly paranormal activity that I came across, other than just like sensations felt and things like that. I think a lot also has to be said that a lot of these reports happen late at night, which, yes, it's quieter, you notice more, and it is creepier. I mean, it could even just be the feral cats milling about and making more noise that you notice in the quiet once all the guests have gone. Because, number one, it is creepier. You almost expect to be creeped out at that point. But then also, number two, cast members are probably tired, more susceptible to brains running on overtime. However, I do still think that Disneyland is haunted, and I do believe that Frontierland is home to some Disneyland ghosts. The deaths are a very real part of the park's history, and whether they were the guests' own fault or not, the stories are still utterly heartbreaking. I just cannot get Dorian Delarue out of my head. I truly hope that he is doing okay. Couldn't even imagine losing my brother in that way, right in front of me. But then Luann, just visiting Disneyland for a bit of fun on Christmas Eve. Any day is tragic, but that day of all days. And right in front of his young kid and step-grandkid. In such a brutal way, it truly does not bear thinking about. But all of the deaths, Marcello, Philip, I truly believe that they're all going to add to that energy. And energy is something I've mentioned before with other potentially haunted theme parks and things. You've got millions of people visiting Disneyland each year, excited for a magical day out. They're spending the day riding roller coasters designed to exhilarate, all that energy, excitement, fear, all of it. I think that does contribute or even amplify the energy of something otherworldly going on there. But let me know what you think of it all. Do you think Disneyland is haunted? Have you ever visited and had an experience that you couldn't explain? Tell me all of the things. And also tell me when I get around to doing another part of this Haunted Disney series, because there are oh so many more parts that I need to do. Where would you like me to cover next? The hotel, that's got a bunch of stories, a different themed area of the park, Disney California Adventure, or even a different park altogether. I hear Walt Disney World has a story or two. And I've mentioned the other parts in this series quite a bit throughout this one, but if you want more Haunted Disneyland and you haven't seen the others yet, part 1 goes all through the sightings of Walt Disney, all over the place. We follow Uncle Walt here, there, and everywhere across the park. Part 2 talks about the Haunted Mansion, because perhaps unsurprisingly to no one, the Haunted Mansion is probably the most haunted attraction in the park, as far as I can tell throughout my research so far. And then part 3, we chatted about Tomorrowland and all of the allegedly haunted attractions within it. So if you enjoyed this video, please do let me know by leaving it a little like. And if this is the first time you've come across me and the promise of Disneyland ghosts was too intriguing not to check out, hello, welcome, hi. I don't just cover Disney, but I do chat about ghosts and haunted places every week, so if that sounds good to you, maybe you'd like to subscribe. But anyway, that is all from me today. Go and get a drink of water. The American frontier is hot out there. I cannot wait to chat with you more about the morbid, mysterious and macabre. So until next time, sleep safe Bean, how long has that been flashing like that for? That should be purple. And the only way it can not be purple right now is if you've knocked it. I'm gonna assume you knocked it. Or maybe it was the ghosts.